Sohaim Tovim Talmudim. Good afternoon, students. Great to be back with you. We're going to try something slightly different. I was anticipating moving into drill number 16, and then as I got thinking about it, it's a much better idea. Go back to drill 8, which is called reading downhill with basic translation before getting into drill 16, running with the scholars, just because it's important for us to have a pretty solid grasp on an actual translation of the passage before we begin to craft our own translation and then compare that with various major Bible translations out there. That's what drill 16 is all about, running with the scholars. And so let's go ahead and do that, and we'll jump to the placard for this lesson. Okay, so there we have it. This should look slightly familiar to you. It's not the first time you've seen this. This would be drill number 8, reading downhill and basic translation. Still working on the mini verse, probably one of the shortest verses that you're going to see in the Torah, Genesis 12, verse 9. Let's go ahead and review our instructions for this particular drill. I'm going to start by printing out your practice verse, or choose to complete this reading lesson just simply by reading off of your computer screen is fine. The practice verse will come in handy after the reading practice, just because part of the assignment is to complete an actual translation of the passage, even if it means that you have to look up most or even all of the words using blueletterbible.org. You've got to start somewhere. And so as we're building our vocabulary, you will get to a point where you recognize quite a few of the words. And then as you memorize conjunctions and get a handle on prepositions, you study pronouns and begin memorizing some of the more common pronouns that are affixed to the beginning and ending of verbs, the ending of nouns. Things will begin to take shape more and more, but it will be a gradual process. All the components are important. Vocabulary memorization is hugely important, because you could know all this other stuff, but if you don't know the basic vocabulary, you won't even have a clue really what are you looking at. So you need to memorize the vocabulary first, and then you'll be more prepared to recognize the root of certain verbs and nouns because you've taken the time to memorize the vocabulary. Okay, point number 2 would be to start your reading as slowly as you need to and gradually increase your reading speed. I generally do 3 different reading sets through a verse. This is not going to take long because it's a mini verse. You want to take a small break between reading sessions. So let's say you've gone through a passage 5, 6 times. It would be a good idea just to take a break for 5 minutes and then come back to it and do it 3, 4, or 5, 6 times more. And you want to do it until you feel pretty comfortable with the speed of your reading. And I have included point number 3, the ability to check your reading accuracy by acquiring the Tanakh Read Along app. And I've already gone into detail and delivered many accolades regarding this free app, which is phenomenal. And that's one way that you can positively check, am I doing this right? Am I enunciating the words, putting the stress of the correct syllable? Am I pronouncing the vowels correctly, etc.? Comparing it with a professional reader. I'm not always going to be with you, and you're not always going to have my videos with you for every verse that you're studying, obviously. So it's good to have some type of a comprehensive software or app with a professional reader where you can actually check yourself, and a lot of the learning will come as you go. Finally, we're going to carefully focus as I translate the Hebrew text into English. I'm going to do that for you. We're going to break that all down. Be sure to take notes on this part of the assignment, and you want to jot down anything that you learn, anything that kind of the light goes on, wow, that was new. Put it in your journal, your learning journal, and store it away, something that you can refer back to. Also, you certainly want to document any questions and either save those questions for when we meet once a month. You could Google them for an answer. Those first 2 suggestions do not work for you. You've tried them and you've kind of struck out. At that point in time, feel free to reach out to me, and that is if you have the standard or ultra subscriptions. Part of your subscription is you have the ability, there's a teacher-student communications portal that we utilize through Google Docs, and you can submit a question, and I will be alerted and have the ability to answer the question. So I think said, let's move on to our reading assignment. Okay, let's read together. First word, Vayisa. Vayisa, name of our patriarch, Avram. Haloch, haloch, 2-syllable word. Vanasoa. I'm going to pay attention here to, this is called a furtive patach. and is pronounced immediately after the preceding vowel, va, na, soa. Particular font I'm using, I love the consonantal font of this particular font. It's called Drugulin, and I love it. However, there are some problem spots where some of the vowels occasionally or cantillation marks get obscured or put slightly not right where they belong. So this patak really should be slightly to the right a little bit. So it is not connected to the bottom of the ayin. It is separate from. So I will just draw your attention to that. If you see something in future lessons that that doesn't look quite right, it's kind of like a font complication, and I'll have to do some more research for some better fonts. But like I said, I love the consonantal font of this. It's very beautiful. All right, moving on. Hanegba. So 3-syllable word. Ha. Negba, silent shva. And we have a petucha symbol. I actually have a special layout I've prepared for you in your download section that goes through the symbols occasionally in certain chumashim. Chumash is a copy of the first 5 books of Moses, could be all in Hebrew, could be Hebrew with some English translation. And many of those have, occasionally you'll see a fe or a samek that appears at the end of a verse. This harkens back to ancient times where the Masoretes would divide up the Hebrew text and would segment certain portions out, almost like a paragraph break. Tucha means open. There's an open space in the text, so the text will run for a certain period of time. There'll be a little slight opening, could be 2 inches, could be 4 inches, and then on the same line, the Hebrew text will begin. And that's a less substantial break. And then you have setuma, that's the complete break where it drops off in the middle of a line of text, and then there's nothing more for the end of the line. It's all blank, and then the next line it picks up fresh, or it may even skip a whole nother line. So it just depends on the manuscript traditions. So that's a very quick overview of Petucha Situma. It's a lot of new Hebrew students, even the intermediate ones, that they have no clue what that is, and they're wondering. So prepared a special layout for you. Hopefully that will make sense to you with all the diagramming that I did. All right, let's clear the screen. We're going to try this a little bit faster. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea. I know it's a really short pasuk, but wouldn't be a bad idea. This is a kaf katan that appears above the resh here. That's a diacritical marker. That's a pausal disjunctive marker. It's a pausal disjunctive marker, meaning to pause. So really, there's only one pause here in the midst of this mini verse. So this would be pronounced Vayisa Avram, pause, Haloch Vanasoa Hanegba. Let's try that one final time. Vayisa Avram, Haloch Vanasoa Hanegba. That's how you'd say that. Vayisa Avram, Haloch Vanasoa Hanegba. We're ready to jump on down to our translational page, which is your answer key. You have an answer key. You can download this, print this out. Feel free if you want to try your hand at translating this like on your own and by referring to blueletterbible.com where you have problems and comparing it with mine. That wouldn't be a bad idea. I'm not saying you have to do that. If you've got a little more extra time and you're ambitious, it would be a fruitful exercise, I believe. Okay, I'm going to draw your attention to one word at a time. With Hebrew, we begin oftentimes with a verb form. Of course, this particular verb form does have a pronominal suffix, an imperfect suffix that is represented by the prefix yod. That means he will. And then we have the vav conversive, which comes before that, which has the impact of reversing the tenses. So instead of he will do something, it's and he did something. The vav is and. So literally, this would mean one of the primary definitions is to pull something out or up, and he pulled up. And that is an idiom for departing. So in those days, you'd have nomadic people groups that would live in the desert regions. They would move from place to place, seeking to find some pasture land for their cattle. And they would invariably have to pull the tent stakes up, roll up their tents, pack it all up on their cattle or their camels or whatever they had, and move on to the next location. And so that's a very earthy word. I love the word. So Vayisa comes from Nasa, and that is to pull out or to pull up, and referring to the tent stakes. So this would be translated as I have in the red, and he pulled up. So that's the primary verbal word coming first. I guess you could say he is the subject, but that's not really the subject because the subject, it comes the next word after Avram, Abram is the subject, and that's who the he is. So first it uses a pronoun to tell you it's a masculine singular person that is performing an action, but then it actually goes to tell you, well, who the he is, which is very helpful. And so Avram really is the subject. We saw Avram, and Avram pulled up. Haloch, that word means to walk. And we can see the three-lettered root visible and still evident, of course, with a holem vav there separating it. But we've got the hey, the lamed, chaf sofit, and that is the root that means to walk or to go. It also became an idiom for halakha, for the mitzvot, for how to perform the commandments that God has given in his instruction manual. And so that is an actual rabbinic word. It's also a biblical word that has deep, deep roots. And the rabbinic community and Orthodox Judaism is always talking about your halacha, or if it's Ashkenazic, they would say your halacha. Your halacha is your system or your understanding, your methodology for observing the mitzvot, being faithful to observe the mitzvot that God has given in the Torah. So it's all tied to this root, meaning to physically walk someplace. But it applies spiritually to your walk with God in terms of his principles, his ways, his ordinances. Do you walk in those or do you ignore those? Do you study those? Do you meditate on those? Or are those not important at all because we're all under grace now? So somehow there's going to be a place of balance. We don't want to go too heavy into the mitzvot because you can lose track of grace and the spirit, but yet you don't want to go too far in the other direction, in the other gutter where mitzvot, commands, ordinances, principles, they don't even matter at all, and we're just saved by grace and it becomes really like sloppy grace or sloppy agape, as some would say. All right, next word is vanasoa. Vanasoa. So the vav means and that is and to journey, and to journey. Like if I just read the English translation that's in the Hebrew order, it would be in Avram pulled up, or he departed to walk or to go, and to journey toward the Negev. So really we've got synonyms like to walk and to journey, really those are the same thing. And the text is just giving us a couple different word choices to describe the same activity. And so he was walking and he was journeying all at the same time. These are infinitives, manasoa, and to journey. Hanegba, probably detect the root. Nun gimel bet. The Negev is the desert regions, southern part of Israel. Not a lot of greens there, but the nomads still live there today. And so Hanegba, Hanegev would be the Negev, or the southern desert regions of Israel. Of course, it wasn't called Israel yet, it was called Canaan land, Canaan. But Ha-Negba, there's a hey in the end noted to be a hey of direction, which will mean to or toward. So when you see that, and if it's attached to some nouns, it may mean her. Could be a feminine pronoun. Context really determines meaning. Many times I notice the directional hays, they tend to come the last word of a sentence, but not in every case. So it's something you can be prepared for, make a mental note. Hanegva, to the Negev or toward the Negev. So wherever he was, we could, read the English text by backing up, see where he was last. I've actually forgotten because we've been focusing so much on the trees. It's easy to lose sight of the whole forest when you've been analyzing a particular tree. That's where we've been in performing these drills. It's pretty much it for our translation today. So you want to make sure that you download and print out any sorts of handouts that I've left you. I've mentioned like 3 of them already. You get a practice first. You have an answer key, translational answer key, and then you've got that special layout having to do with Petucha and Setuma. I'd like you to give that a review. I think that will be pretty interesting. It will definitely be new to most people. And you'll know a lot more than most even intermediate Hebrew students know in reviewing that layout. That's generally not taught on in biblical Hebrew classes generally. All right, we'll put the cap on it, and I'm going to go ahead and immediately begin recording the very next drill, which would be the final drill for Genesis 12:9, running with the scholars, the final drill, 16th of 16 essential drills to accelerate your Hebrew education. Blessings to you. Shalom, shalom. Lahitra out.